When you hear the name Canada, what's the first word to pop into your head? Poutine? Snow? Maple syrup? How about ghosts? Canada is a country rich in history and lore, and while most people may not associate it with the spirits of the dead, Canada has more than its fair share of haunted landmarks. Today, on Haunted Earth, we will be taking a look at 5 of the most haunted places in Canada. Well known for the lighthouse built in 1914, Peggy's Cove is a small community that is quite popular with tourists for its beauty and close proximity to scenic St. Margaret's Bay. However, tourists are not the only visitors to the lighthouse of Peggy's Cove. The resident ghost, known as the Lady in Blue, is said to spend much of her time near the waters of the lighthouse at Peggy's Point, the supposed site of her death. The Lady in Blue has 2 similar origins of how she came to Peggy's Cove to begin with. One story claims that she was an immigrant from Europe who was forced to leave her children behind, while the other story claims that she was the sole survivor of a shipwreck, losing her children to the tragedy. Both stories come together when the woman remarries, and her husband, noticing his wife often staring out to the sea, thinking of her children, tries to cheer her up by dancing on the water-worn rocks. Unfortunately for the lady, tragedy would strike as he slipped and struck his head, dying from his injuries. It is said that shortly after, the Lady in Blue was seen walking towards the shore near where the lighthouse now stands, never to be seen again. Seen alive, that is. Tourists and locals alike can be quoted often seeing a lone woman dressed in blue walking towards the waters of St. Margaret's Bay, perhaps reliving her suicide, desperate to be reunited with her husband and children once again. The Old Spaghetti Factory in Vancouver, British Columbia is a restaurant built back in 1970, well known for its delicious menu items, the antique trolley car that sits near the front of the restaurant, and of course, its ghostly inhabitants. 2 of the most well-known spirits that haunt the Old Spaghetti Factory include a trolley conductor who many witnesses see in or around the old trolley car mentioned earlier. The second ghost is of a young boy that can be usually seen dressed in clothing from the 19th century all through the restaurant. One particularly interesting story states that while cleaning up the restaurant one night, a waitress witnessed the little boy running under a table. Following him, the waitress noticed the boy's odd clothing and went to fetch her manager, who let her know that there were no families at the restaurant at the time. When the pair returned to where the waitress had left the boy, he was nowhere to be seen. The site of one of the bloodiest battles in Canadian history, the Plains of Abraham is steeped in ghostly apparitions. It was here that the British forces, led by General James Wolfe, attempted to take control of Quebec City from the French, led by the Marquis de Montcalm, leading to thousands of dead soldiers on both sides. While the British came out victorious, both sides lost their generals in the conflict. It would seem that, even in death, the brave soldiers who fought for their countries continue to wage war to this day, as the sounds of phantom musket and cannon fire could be heard along with the whining of horses and the screams of dying men. Some people claim to even see the spirits of those lost soldiers patrolling the grounds, often mistaking them for reenactors, until they vanish before their eyes. The ghosts of soldiers are not the only spirits said to haunt this old battlefield. There are also reports of the specter of a woman hung near the Plains of Abraham in 1763 for the murder of her second husband. Known simply as La Corrivue, it is said that she haunts the area surrounding the plains, with some early reports even claiming that she would attack travelers at night. Regarded as more of a legend now than anything else, La Corée-Vue is still quite a disturbing addition to the many restless spirits that the Plains of Abraham is host to. Known as the Castle of the Rockies, the Banff Springs Hotel was built back in the 19th century by American architect Bruce Price as one of Canada's Grand Railway hotels. Like many of the locations on the list, the Banff Springs Hotel oozes history from its walls, cutting a truly impressive figure into the Canadian Rockies, even to this day. Hosting a number of guests in its time, including Marilyn Monroe, Helen Keller, and Benny Goodman, just to name a few, the hotel was sure to make a name for itself. However, as time went on, the hotel became known for more than just its famous clientele list. Though the hotel will vehemently deny this officially, the hotel is home to at least 2 permanent spectral guests. One of the most prevalent, and possibly the most benign ghost in the residence, is that of Sam the Bellman, an old Scottish man who had worked for the hotel for years. It is said that Sam always started to haunt the place once he died, and it would seem he made good on the promise, offering to help guests with their luggage to this day. Sam has also been linked to phantom lights in the halls of the hotel, as well as the opening and closing of elevator doors at random intervals. The second ghost that guests quite often share their accommodations with is known as the Doomed Bride, a young woman who had just been married when tragedy struck when her wedding dress caught fire as she ascended a marble staircase to meet her new husband for their wedding banquet. In a desperate attempt to put the flames out, the bride tripped on her dress and fell down the stairs to her death. It would seem, however, that even death would not stop the bride from celebrating what should have been the best day of her life. Witnesses claim to see the ghostly bride dancing in the Cascade Ballroom, where her banquet was to be held, while others have seen her climbing up those fated steps once more, perhaps hoping to meet with her husband once again. While Sam and the Doomed Bride may be the most well-known ghosts of the Banff Springs Hotel, they are not the only ones. Perhaps the most unsettling spirits of the hotel can be tied to the now sealed-off room 873, where it is said that a man slaughtered his wife and daughter before taking his own life. Before being sealed off, the room was open to guests after the incident, many of which reported being awoken in the middle of the night by horrifying screams in their room. Reports of bloody fingerprints on the mirrors, as well as the specter of a little girl, were also quite common, until the room was finally sealed off by hotel management. Possibly one of the most infamous buildings in Canada, there was a time when the HI-Ottawa jail hostel was known as the Carleton County Gaol. Built in 1862, the gaol was meant to replace the previous gaol that was located in the basement of the local courthouse. While the gaol may have been a brand new facility meant to house and rehabilitate criminals, it was anything but humane to its residents. Cells were incredibly small with no heating, lighting, or even toilets. The living conditions were incredibly unsanitary, and prisoners had little more to do than simply sit in their cells for hours on end. Eventually, in 1972, the gaol was shut down, and only a year later reopened as the HI-Ottawa Jail Hostel, offering room and board for wary travelers. However, before its conversion into a hostel, the Carleton County Gaol hosted numerous hangings, including the hanging of the hostel's most prevalent spirit, Patrick James Whelan. Convicted for the assassination of one of the Fathers of Confederation and a well-known and beloved politician, Thomas D'Arcy McGee, a crime that many people, even to this day, believe Patrick was innocent of. Hung in front of a crowd of over 5,000 spectators, Patrick was buried in the yard of the gaol, like most of the prisoners that died there, and not, as he was promised by a judge in his family's plot. Many believe that this injustice was the catalyst for the hauntings that would take place in the hostel. Many guests claim to have seen a man that fits Patrick's description standing at the foot of their beds at night, sometimes even holding a Bible in his hands, while those who slept in the cell that belonged to Patrick in death row would report seeing Patrick walking down towards the gallows, reliving the last few moments of his life in death.